Now I want to talk about specifically how I would process in the direction of positives. Now, understand that this dichotomy of positives and negatives, I mean, they both come into play, and that's why you have something to process. So I don't think you can ever exclusively just go off in just running positives or just running negative. You process what presents itself, what manifests to be processed with the being. So here's an example of some, what I've written up and use, as I call it, positives processing. Everything is subject to change. But this begins with getting a goal from the being, a positive, an ability that they want to realize or more fully realize. It can be questioned this way: is there a positive ability or state of being that you would like to create and experience? Or if you've just run a negative, I always, like I was saying earlier, rather than run having this after running out the mass of a negative incident or something, then rather than running having this to fill that void of mass, that low havingness, go right into a positive. Is there a positive ability or state of being related to this area that you would like to create and experience? And almost every single time that you get a very enthusiastic yes and an immediate answer. And with some PCs, I have to say, the PCs, when I say some PCs, there are some beings who have had various forms of processing, not just Scientology. There's something called avatar. It's interesting. Avatar is something that's promoted and emanates from a guy named Harry Palmer. I don't want to go into too great detail, but one of the things Palmer picked up on from what I hear, Buddhism, was the importance of positive gain, creation and discreation. And some of my PCs have done avatar. Interestingly, I shut Harry Palmer down from having a Scientology mission. That was my mission and my assignment when I was a mission holder in Elmira, New York in 1986. There's a squirrel up there named Harry Palmer. He's running a squirrel Scientology mission, and in order to go to court and close him down, the law demands that we have a functioning Scientology installation in the area. I was the guy who went up on the mission to be a mission holder, to establish Scientology there so that the church could go to court and have this guy, his operation, shut down. And here I am later talking about, come full circle to, he did eventually have something that was quite useful. He didn't, I'm not saying he invented it, but he came across it. It's just interesting. And I was instrumental in the saying, you can't call what you're doing Scientology anymore. And here I'm like, I'm almost on the other side, kind of on the other side of that GPM now. I'm here, you know, being more on his side of the fence. You know, as being open to change, amazing things happen. But I mean, I'm not doing what he does or the way he does it, and you know, I'm not saying you know, I'm not in lockstep with anybody. But it's just interesting. I want to acknowledge credit wherever it's due. And I have a couple of PCs who have done his. Later, he developed and called what he was doing Avatar, a year or two after I helped shut him down from calling himself Scientology. And what he was doing was actually quite different. But anyway, these particular PCs have experience in running the idea of creating and positives, and the dichotomy of creation and discreation is very interesting, because these particular PCs will sometimes automatically create a positive after running a negative, and that's a good thing. You know, so with these PCs, they're the only PCs that when I say, is there a positive ability or state of being related to this area that you would like to create an experience? Sometimes we'll say, I'm already doing it. That's an ideal state, I think, you know, not to need the help or guidance, that just to go in that positive direction. It's a plus. Anyway, the other 19 out of 20 times in session, including with these PCs, they're going to have something. They're going to have an ability related to the negative we just processed. The negative was what blocked an ability or state of being that's a goal for the person. That's why their file clerk offered it up, and they were consciously experiencing the feelings of it, because it was getting in their way. And that's the case that is relevant, not every negative experience you ever had on your whole track. There's really no point in, the idea that you just keep, digging that hole deeper and deeper until there's nothing there. You're not going to dig all your way to China, and you're not going to achieve some advanced ultimate OT state by just digging out negatives. It has a place and a purpose, and that's it. So anyway, another way to ask it is, what intention, purpose, or goal are you pursuing that underlies all this charge? And sometimes you can ask that when the person's telling you what's upsetting them, and then you might find you don't even have to process the negative. They can give you something, you go right into processing the positive. As the negative gets in the way, you'll handle that. I'm going to explain how we do that. Another way would be to simply say, tell me a goal you'd like to accomplish in life and or through processing. However you get it, you get positive. Now the first thing I would want to check for, and what I have next on this positive processing procedure, would be to ask them, is there some identity you get stuck in that does not allow for full accomplishment of this goal? See, now we're applying what John Galusha discovered from Hubbard's observation that too much creative processing beefs up the bank. It means there's an identity with a limit that's preventing that creative processing from going any further successfully. So ask for that identity. Is there some identity that you get stuck in that does not allow for full accomplishment of this goal? And if you get a yes to that question, or if I get a yes to that question, and most of the time I will, now we're going to run that procedure from Alan Walter, Presence 3, the identity handling. And then, having done that, running out the negative of the identity and running processes of the usefulness of the identity as well in a positive, conscious sense, and not an automatic being stuck in it kind of sense. Okay, anyway, now we'll run a process, quite possibly something from creation of human ability is where I look, that relates well to that particular goal of the PC. I'll give you an example of this. I gave the example earlier of feeling like a person can't control anything. I can't control anything. And we wind up running the negative, the incidents related to that, or the identities related to that as well. And now the positive would be to run a creative process on the subject of control. So, it so happens, I do a lot of research and study of the book Creation of Human Ability as a great source of positive processing. And there's a process in Creation of Human Ability, that book called R242, Root 2 Process 42. The name of the process is Pandeterminism. And it's all about control. So we take this process, R242. I just opened the book to that exact page. That stuff happens for me all the time. It just did now. Little spiritual ability there. Anyway, it describes the process and the commands of R242. Now understand, this is back in the 1950s, before a lot more information was uncovered about case and spirituality. But anyway, the commands or instructions were to ask the person, what do you feel you could control? All right? And give me some more things you could control. And that was the entire process. Okay, so you can see how it runs in a positive sense, getting the person to realize more and more what they could control. Okay, but now what I do with these processes, okay, that's the original process. Basically one command, tell me what you can control. Okay, but now, these days, going forward, we know that the abilities and limitations of a being are imposed on a variety of what we call flows. Not just what a person can cause, but or been affected by, but what other people can cause and are affected by. A person feels responsible for a wider sphere than just what they themselves can do or have experienced. And so I rewrite these processes to put in the flows that were not known or understood at that point in time. So let me see if I can find my R242. This is my folder of expanded processes from creation of human ability. And when you think about the subject of control, okay, and all the negative experiences and positive experiences, there's control that a person feels crushes their self-determinism. Like the pre-clear who says, I feel like I can't control anything. Okay? Then there's the charge or bad feeling or energy connected with seeing somebody else abusing somebody else and enforcing control on them. There's the experience of a mob enforcing something on an individual. Others, plural. There's all these different circumstances. And any and all of these things leave us with three-dimensional holographic images with force and mass that affect our concept and our realization of control. So now I've taken that R242, tell me some things you can control. And it actually worked out to 26 commands, but this has been amazingly effective. Tell me some things you can control. I want to say in all of these commands, this kind of processing, you want to get away from a rhythm and a drill of one question, one answer, one question, one answer, one question, one answer. You don't want that, okay? That's like putting the person in some sort of automaticity. It's like if they've drilled TRs, then they're sitting there like they're drilling TRs. They do what they're supposed to do and give you one answer. You don't want that. You always want to tell the person, give me everything that comes up. I'm going to make a general point in processing. I tell every pre-clear, every person I'm auditing, never suppress or evaluate your answer, okay? Don't apologize for your answer. When people drill TRs, there's a drill called TR3, and it's like, it directs the person to, if the answer is not an answer to the question, okay, that right there is evaluation. You know, when you evaluate whether or not it's an answer to the question, okay, then you say, I'll repeat the auditing command. Do birds fly? You know what? That drill should be entirely done away with. I'm saying, in my view, maybe I shouldn't say absolutely, in my view, that drill should be entirely done away with. Every response you get from a pre-clear in a session, everything they express comes from their file clerk. You know, you do not suppress the PC's instincts, their file clerk, in presenting whatever is manifesting from their case, ever. I would never say in those circumstances to give the impression that there was something wrong with the PC's answer. I'll repeat that question. Okay, the only time I would say that is if they said they didn't hear the question, or could you ask me that again? That's the only time I'm going to repeat an auditing question. Say, okay, I'll repeat. I don't think I'd ever say I'll repeat the auditing question. It's rote. You know, but anyway, as this relates to what we're doing, sometimes a pre-clear will suppress an answer because of that background, and they'll say, and they'll look for something, you know, they'll try to, basically, now they're resisting what their file clerk is giving them because they've been indoctrinated to do that. You don't want that in a session. It's amazing, but one for one, every single time, I've seen where pre-clear would say something that's, this doesn't seem to be an answer to the question, but I'm getting a picture of a mouse. And you know what? Good. Continue to express that. Continue to express that. Continue. And every single time, always, 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 absolutely always, it will wind up relating to the material that we're processing. Always. There's nothing where the, you know, pre-clear doesn't randomly say something that has nothing to do with what their attention is on in the session. It never happens. It's a fallacy. So the best thing you can do for a pre-clear is get them to understand that they have the total freedom, and it's very important that they express whatever is coming up for them. So in line with that, they should express every answer they have to the question. Not just one. If they have 6, the pre-clear may say, I'm not getting anything. You know what? That's cool. I totally accept that and move on to the next question. I don't force them at all. I don't force you. Don't force the pre-clear by inhibiting their answers, by saying, that's, you know, I'll repeat the question, that's not an answer, or by enforcing. You don't get anything? Well, look some more. You know, either way, the bank, the reactive mind, every three-dimensional image of pressure and pain and force that is inhibiting the person is a matter of enforcements and inhibitions. So the last thing you can do in a session, if the session is for the person in front of you, is to introduce enforcements and inhibitions into the communication cycle of the processing. Never imply or in any way even silently, telepathically have the thought that there's something wrong with their answer or their no answer. It's totally keying the person in. It's bringing in force of inhibition and enforcement, and that's all the bank is, and you're supposed to be uncreating that, not creating that. Very important point. So anyway, that is always my approach, and when it's not infrequent that a person who's had Scientology processing is going to say, "Oh, never mind, I'm sorry. What was the question you asked me?" And I'm always going to say, "Oh, you're answering the question. The question was this, but just continue. Continue until you fully expressed whatever's coming up for you." God, that works brilliantly. So, again, before running something like this, I'm always going to say, this is not one question, one answer. Give me anything, everything, or nothing, whatever you're getting an answer to the question. Always. So with this particular process, we've gone from tell me some things you can control, which I'm sure had a degree of effectiveness. I'm not questioning that, but we want to really flesh this out. So, what can you experience yourself controlling? Because there's the creating effect on self. What can you experience yourself controlling? That also can have charge. You want to have them increase their ability to experience their self-controlling things. What can another experience you controlling? What can others experience you controlling? What can another control? What can you experience another controlling? What can others experience another controlling? What can others control? What can you experience others controlling? What can another experience others controlling? Now again, when we see this plural others, it's because there's a difference between another and others. There is the perception of a group or a mob that people sometimes find themselves in opposition to, or trying to control, or trying to be in harmony with, rather than a single individual. When you give a talk in front of a group of people, or when you take a new job and everybody else is new to you, this us, them, me, them thing, there is case on this. There's a image of, and there's many past experiences relating to this. And you want to bring about in this person a realization of willingness to experience and create control in all circumstances, with an individual, with a group, from them to them, or this one to that group. All of these are necessary to fully resolve and increase if you're going to create an overall ultimate goal, whatever that ultimate goal may be. And in this case, it's a subject of control. So what can another experience others controlling? We've all perceived somebody getting victimized by the control of a group. I won't go into experiences with the Church of Scientology as an example, any more than saying that. Okay, what can others experience another controlling? What can you control about yourself? That's a real key one, isn't it? What can another experience you controlling about yourself? I'm going to give you all 26 of these. What can others experience you controlling about yourself? How about the whole subject of self-consciousness and shrinking as a being because you don't want others to be critical or evaluative and feel self-conscious about what you do or how you do it around other people? Okay, so what can others experience you controlling about yourself? What can you control another to do differently or not do? What I'm really doing there is more specifically now, the anatomy of control we've learned in Scientology is to start, change, and stop. So that translates into do differently or not do. So I'm just getting the person to now, at this point in the process, focus more specifically on the separate parts of control. What can you control another to do differently or not do? What can another experience having you control them to do differently or not do? Sometimes you have charge, I don't want to impose on another person, but maybe there are situations where it's a good thing to do that for them and you, whatever the situation is. What can others experience having you control another to do differently or not do? What can you experience having another control you to do differently or not do? Every facet of control you want the person to be capable of creating and experiencing if their goal is to gain control and have control. What can another experience controlling you to do differently or not do? What can others experience another controlling you to do differently or not do? Again, now with the separate anatomies, I'm getting them to focus on each separate part of control. What can another control others to do differently or not do? What can another experience controlling others to do differently or not do? Everybody hearing these commands on this video is getting pictures. As you are, I'm sure. What can others experience another controlling others to do differently or not do? What can another experience others controlling them to do differently or not do? What can you control yourself to do differently or not do? And the final question, what can you experience controlling yourself to do differently or not do? I had occasion to run this week. Actually, the first time I used this full expanded R242 pan-determinism process. I had already programmed for this pre-clear because they had been talking about control a couple of different times. So it happened to be step 3 of what I intended to do with them earlier this week in a session. But at the beginning of a session, I always start a session with how are you doing and what's been happening since your last session. Always start off with a two-way comm. Very important. It fleshes out unacknowledged wins and gains from things that fully unfolded after the session, any charge that needs to be handled, anything that's come up, and very frequently leads to what we should do next in the session based on what comes out of that. So in this particular case, how have you been since your last session and what's been happening? This very much came up, this matter of control. And so I said, okay, well, would you like to address these issues relating to the control? Or would you like to go next to a positive, creative process of increasing your ability to control? What resonates with you? And the PC said, oh, I'm going to go to the positive. And so we ran this process, R242, where I just gave the commands. And the interesting thing was that the process fully got its end result, which was the person's, a floating TA, which means the meter was indicating the person was in a very high state of relief and release. Okay? And voicing, what the person expressed, the words they used were, this is total opposite of the beginning of this session when I felt I couldn't control anything. Now I feel like I can control anything and everything. That's what we were going for. And it happened just on one run-through. I mean, this is alternate repetitive, which means I would ordinarily expect to go around and around through all those questions again and again. But apparently separating it out into all these different flows successfully resolved it on once through on the very end of completing question number 26, which I thought was very interesting. The point of this again is that is a total example of positive gain processing. What can the person control? What control can a person experience? It's not can't, it's can. And again, it's with the goal that the person themselves has. So going back to my positive processing procedure, that was a creative processing step.